Today I want to talk about microphones. If you record yourself at home, I definitely suggest you watch this video because I'm going to share some tips that I've learned over the years that I haven't really seen many other people sharing. So, the most important things when recording yourself, in my opinion, are to know your instrument, to know your room, and to know your equipment. Naturally, you get to know your instrument over time. You play it a lot, if you're like me. You'll get to know your room by experimentation, moving around within the room and finding the sweet spots. Also, a lot of times in the room, we don't have many options. So basically, we're stuck with what we have in these home studio situations. Now, the last piece is the equipment. Now, in my opinion, this is the toughest thing to really learn. Using your equipment a lot will get you more familiar with it. A lot of the mics that I've had for 10 years almost or more. And I still find myself second guessing sometimes. But what I did is I made a nice reference for myself. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But what I did was I played the same piece over and over. And I switched out my mics. I used every mic that I had at the time, every pickup pattern on each different mic. I kept the mics about the same distance from the guitar. And then I just ran through the same piece over and over, recording it with a different mic. So what this did was enable me to listen back and do a quick little cut between each mic to hear how it sounded. I know my guitar sound pretty well, and this was one of the more important things that I've ever done to get to know my microphones. Some sounded boxier than I remembered. Some had like a lack of high end. Some were a little muddy. Some had a brilliance to them. And knowing this about my mics really helped my multi-track recording. If you do any multi-track recordings at home, I definitely suggest you make a reference like this yourself. This could be recording multiple instruments or recording the same instrument layered multiple times. And you can do this if you have multiple microphones to experiment with, or even if you have one microphone that has adjustable pickup patterns. It doesn't have to be guitar either. Whatever instrument you play, you can set up like this. Also, you can do similar things to learn your room if you kind of walk around and record. I feel this is the only true way to get to know your microphones. You could look up a frequency response graph online, but it's not the same. Each mic has its own characteristic, its own sound, much like an instrument does, and no graph is going to show you the feeling that each mic brings out. So let's listen to the one I did, and it might inspire you to do one of your own, or it might inspire you to say, hey, I like the sound of that mic on acoustic guitar, and you want to pick up that specific mic. I do reference some very common mics, as well as some not so common mics from ribbons, dynamics, condensers, tube condensers, and of course there's cardioid mics, figure 8 mics, and omnidirectional mics too. So let's give those a listen now and see. So as you can see, that's a pretty wide variety of sounds from the same instrument in the same room. The only difference is the mic in each of these situations. So how can this information help you? How can it help you to make your own reference like this? Let's say, for example, you're recording a song with 6 different instrument parts. If you're using the same mic every time, you're going to get a frequency buildup, and it's going to start to sound unclear and a little bit messy. So I'm going to show you a little graph here to explain this. Okay, so you can see, looking at the frequency response chart for this mic, that there's a spot where there's a bump and there's a spot where there's a dip. Now, if you use this same microphone on 6 tracks, then you get 6 times the buildup in this one frequency range, and then 6 times the drop off in this other frequency range. And depending on where the bumps and dips are in your microphone's frequency response, it's going to sound thin, or it's going to sound muddy, or it's going to sound harsh, and you'll be forced to EQ things in and out. Now, I like to use EQ as sparingly as possible because it doesn't sound as natural as fixing things at the source. So if you use different microphones for each of these layers, you don't get that buildup, and you can be a little strategic about things. You can say, oh, this microphone has a bump in the low frequencies, so I'm going to use that for the hand percussion of what's supposed to sound like a kick drum, and it gives it even more of a kick drum sound. Or you can say, I'm going to use an SM57 because it rolls off a lot of the high end, and I want this piece to not be front and center. Now, another reason why you might want to use different mics is because some are more sensitive than others. If you use your condenser mic pair for every layered instrument, those are sensitive mics that are going to pick up background noise like a refrigerator running the next room over, or your cat in the litter box, different things like that. And you don't want that. So what you might do is use a condenser and then use a dynamic mic that's going to pick up less background sound for some little accent parts in your piece, because you don't want to be coming in and out with that background noise. Now, if you just have one microphone, but the microphone has switchable polar patterns, you might do something like using Omni for your strumming part, and then flip it to cardioid, which is more directional, and use that for the lead part. And it gives it that separation, and the pickup pattern will usually change the frequency response too. So it sounds like you're almost using a different mic, and it gives it that separation you need. I'm going to show you some examples. Now, for this one, I used a different mic on everything. For this song, for instance, Oppressed People, I used the CM47 mic on the bass, a Rode NT1 pair on the acoustic guitar, a Shure SM57 for one of the guitar accent parts, an Audix D6, which is a kick mic for the banging percussion, and I used a pair of SE1A small diaphragm condensers for the shaker-esque percussion part, played on the top of the guitar, just sliding it. So each of those parts got a different mic, and it gives it that separation. And the reason I chose each of those is, listening back to my references, knowing my mics, I knew which mic would suit each instrument and part to make it sound like that original Final Fantasy VII game feel as much as it could using just acoustic guitars. Now, this has always been a challenge, but a fun kind of challenge, and if you have access to different microphones, I suggest you try it too. Okay, so here's another example. This is On That Day 5 years ago from Final Fantasy VII. this is just 3 parts, all acoustic guitars, no bass. And for every one of these, I use the same mic, the Rode NT1. For the chords, I did a spaced pair. And then that was through an API style warm audio preamp. So it's punchier, it's quicker. And then spaced pair through warm audio Neve style preamp for the next part, which is a little slower and silkier sounding, kind of tames the transients a little bit. And then the lead was a single mic. So you've got the width of the pair and then the single mic in the center to give that separation. So you can find different ways to separate your tracks, even if you don't have access to a ton of microphones. So if you already have one mic, you don't need to get the fanciest mic. You can even just get some kind of cheap dynamic mic and see how they sound together. So it's more about separation and variety to get what you're going for your multi-track recording. Now remember, of course, the most important aspect is the performance, you, the player, and then instrument, and then the equipment kind of falls below that, but it is definitely a consideration. If you found this video helpful, help me out and give me a like and subscribe. Leave a message in the comments if you want to see more videos like this, and keep on playing, keep on recording.